Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I am talking about Solnar Swift Arc. So that is the tabletop role-playing game I'm currently writing. Today I want to talk about a few things. I want to talk about player moves. I want to talk about play and say. I want to talk about non-player character binding. All right. So let's talk about player character moves. So one of the things I have an idea for this is right now, so the whole point of Solnar Swift Arc, tell that story faster, tell that story faster, tell that story faster, right? It's just the entire point of the game, right? And right now, one of the things that's grinding that to a halt in the average tabletop role-playing game is you roll for everything. Currently, the criteria for a roll is if there's a significant possibility for failure, then you roll, right? And so one of the worst examples of this is if you're playing a 15th level character in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. By the way, I love 5th edition. Every time I use a D&D example, it's just me saying, hey, this is the game we all care about, right? That is the Mac Daddy of all role-playing games. So I'm not saying that 5th edition is a bad game. I'm saying I'm trying to beat it. Like, it has set the bar. You know, like Dungeons & Dragons, I have immense respect for it. More than any other tabletop role-playing game. It's super special to me. So when I say, oh, I don't like this about D&D, I just got to be super clear. I'm using it as a wall to push off of, right? And so just wanted to be super clear about that. But terrible problem in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. 15th level cleric and 8 goblins surround you. You have to roll to see if you can kill each one of those goblins. And maybe you have multiple attacks, but you're going to have to make a different roll for each one of those, right? To me, a 15th level 15th level paladin surrounded by 8 goblins, he swings around in a circle and he kills every single one of them, right? And you don't roll for that. It just happens, right? Like, and honestly, the odds of that happening on the game table are absolutely very high. So what is the actual reason we're making that roll? And it's just tradition. That's the only reason, right? So player moves. I want to talk about player moves, right? So player moves are really important. And let me talk about player moves and what they do, right? So player moves are, oh, check out my Kylo Ren shirt. Sorry. Sorry. So basically, the player moves are, here's how a player move would occur, okay? Devastating Slay is a player move. This player move is distinct to the fighter class, right? And so you get that player move by being a fighter, right? And you might get that specific fighter move at 5th level, right? And so what that is your fighter comes forward and he could do this against a henchman or a minion, but he can't do this against a villain, right? So we've put some boundaries around it. And what he does is he charges, and him and the henchman both, bring out their swords, and they clash together, and they pass each other, and everyone on the battlefield looks at them and goes, which one of them just died? Because we heard a whole lot of scraping, and we heard the slice of a blade. Which one died, right? So our player character has just slayed a henchman, right? And that henchman just falls over, right? And he's done it in such a grand way that every non-player character enemy within sight that is henchman or minion level has to make a fright check or run. Okay? That's a player move. There's no roll for it, right? The player says, I'm using my player move right now. It's fighter based, and also I'm limited to only use this once per session, not once per encounter, right? And I can have moves, and so one of the things I want to do is I want to have moves, things that characters do without rolling, that are really epic and really cool, right? That they do once per encounter, once per session, once per campaign, right? This is a big one. My character can do this thing once per campaign, and the more infrequent it is, the bigger it is, right? So, and I want the moves to be specific to play frequency. I want the moves to be split specific to class. I want the move to be specific to race. So if I'm a dwarf, right, and one of the things I can do is I can, once per session, I can, I can take my a dwarf player character move, and it doesn't matter if that dwarf is a cleric, or if they're a rogue, or if they're a fighter, or if they're a what's the third one? A wizard. They can take a weapon and go and strike a particular part of the stone structure they're around, and then they can use an interaction like so. Even if you were a wizard and you had a dwarf, you could jam your dagger into your small dagger into a particular area on the wall, and just kick it in, right? And the gargoyle from above would fall off and kill one minion, right? So because of their knowledge of stonework, because of their knowledge of construction, they can use built environments. They can use the material parts of built environments as attacks, or to give them an advantage, or to give their entire party an advantage, right? So these moves are there. You don't roll to do them. You just say it. I do this thing. You know what I mean? And so one of the things is players, every single encounter, every single session, every single campaign, are going to get to do awesome things that cannot be shut down by the GM, right? Also, if you haven't caught this yet, right, players up, GM's down, right? Every tabletop role-playing game in the world has been, has set the DM as a god, saying you control this entire world. I intend to make GMs go way down in prominence and importance and in input into the game. Player agency in this game is going to be one of the highest, probably since Dungeon World, right? So I really intend to shrink the role of the game master. The game master still has control of the game, but there are going to be parts of the game that are completely untouchable by them. Okay, so let's talk about that. What parts of the game are completely untouchable by the game master? Well, there's going to be, so one of the player moves, right? And you can do this move once per encounter, and this is a player move. If you're a player, you can do this, right? Is called a bind. So you can do an NPC bind. You can do a location bind. You can do an item bind, right? And so let's say that a player has a first level player, okay? So the higher in level you are, the broader your bind can be, right? So let's say an item bind, right? So a player character gets a silver dagger, and that silver dagger has a rune on it that has been inscribed on it, and it is completely non-magical. But the rune is for a family in a particular region, right? So it's a historically important dagger. And so what they could do is this player character could pull this out at the hall of, at the hall of family of House Sarsgaard, and they could say, this is I received this dagger from, XYZ lady of your house, and I'm requesting a night's lodging. And they would say, yeah, come on in. Only the most honored people have that dagger. And you could just do that, right? So the player wants, they have this dagger now, right? But in any normal game, the game master can go, you guys are all bound up by orcs, and they take all your equipment, right? In my game, game master can't just do that. Just cannot do that, right? And here's why: when a player uses a player move to bind something, it becomes untouchable to the game master, and guess what else? To the players, right? To the other players. So if something's bound, right? If you bind a location, if you bind a non-player character, if you bind a dagger, only you as the player get to say what happens to that item. Okay? So the player character says this special non-magical rune inscribed dagger, I'm binding it. At that point, the game master cannot do anything to that dagger. Cannot take it away, cannot destroy it, cannot steal it, unless the player allows it. So the game master can say, oh, you know, orcs come along and they steal all your equipment, right? And the player character can say, well, I have this dagger bound, so I still have that on me, right? And the game master goes, yeah, that's right, but hey, listen, I'll pay you 3 XP to change that. You know what I mean? So that gives the game master an option to tell the kind of stories they want, but the stories are truly communally owned, right? And so these moves are really a big part of the game, right? And they will massively accelerate how these games are told, right? Also, a non-player character bind, right? So, you know, one of the things it's always kind of unusual in tabletop role-playing games is you play the tabletop role-playing game, but you're playing a character, right? Well, you know, like a perfect example is I play in a game and, you know, I have a wife and 4 kids, right? But my player character doesn't have those relationships. And so they might, you know, they might be in relationships in the game, right? And those always get weird at the table. Like, you know, that, you know, it's strange and it's hard to get those past, right? But they happen, right? And I want to make structures so that it's less weird and less strange, and also the players are saying, hey, I'm going to start a relationship with this person in this game in this way, right? And right now players don't do that in tabletop role-playing games because all that ever means, it's a classic tabletop role-playing game trope is you care about this person, so I'm going to have them stabbed by an orc at some point, and that's going to give you pathos to storm the castle, right? Worst, you know, and like, it's a trope, right? It's bad. It's just bad game mastering, right? So a non-player character bind, right? The player characters go to an inn each time after they finish 3 different adventures, right? And the inn is, you know, it's called the Golden Stag or whatever it is, right? And when they go there, the cleric is always given an extra portion of mutton when they order mutton. Like, all the other plates are, you know, the mutton's, you know, 3 slices thick, but that player's mutton is always 6 slices thick. What's up with that, you know? And it's always the same, you know, serving person, right? So that's just a really subtle way to say, oh, there's an opportunity for this person, this serving person cares for the cleric more than any of the other player characters, and that's just unique and special, and it brings some flavor to the world, right? But it's also not weird. It's just a way of saying it in an interesting way, right? What that player can do is saying, that serving person at the Golden Stag, I'm binding that player, right? I'm binding that non-player character. That means they determine what happens to that non-player character, not the game master and not any other player. Any other player or game master can say, I would like this to happen to that non-player character, right? But because they've bound it, they give the approval for whether that's an idea or whether it's the reality of the game, right? So this non-player character binding. Oh, and actually, so the other thing is, of course, like, let's say your wizard creates a wizard school, right? Now, this would be high level. You know, you're talking 5, 10, 15th level, right? They can bind that wizard school. So that thing ain't going to burn down. It's not going to go away until that player character says it goes away, right? This is a major change from any tabletop role-playing game I've ever seen. I've never seen this idea in there, right? So this is something I want to build into my game, and these are player moves, right? So binding is important for the next thing I'm going to talk about, which is play and say. So play and say. What is play and say? So here's what play and say is. So play is, I am going to play this adventure, right? We as a tabletop role-playing group, we as the player character group, the war band or the adventuring band, right? We are going to do this adventure together, and then you do, right? So the game master, you know, says, hey, here's, you guys go, you know, your adventure is to go and hijack a pirate ship and bring all the grain to a new port where, you know, before it was going to be sold for gold. Now you're going to bring it to this new port where the people in that town, all their crops burned, and now they're going to have enough to get through the winter, right? So that'd be an adventure. And the players get in there and they fight the pirates, right? And they all do it together and they win, right? That is a play adventure, right? What is a say adventure? As soon as they're done with that, right? So that would be an encounter, and it would be like, let's say it's the second encounter. There's always 2 encounters per session in Solnar Swift Arc. Each of those encounters is 25 minutes long. Excuse me. Is 25 minutes long. So what then happens to, sorry about the train here. It's an Acela train. I'll give it one more minute to pass on its way here. Thanks for your patience. Sorry for the noise there. Oh, and I have a really sad story sometime about an Acela train that close to where I live. I don't know if you've seen that situation before. Okay, back to it. Sorry. All right. So so you just had this play adventure. What is a say adventure? So you have your cleric, your rogue, your thief. Your cleric, your rogue, your fighter, and your wizard. They all go and they defeat the pirate ship, and they take it upriver to the new city, to the new village, and now they have enough grain for the winter, right? That's a played adventure, and all the player characters are in that. And then you wrap for the session. Between the sessions, here's what happens. Each player will have a say adventure. And what happens is, after players complete an adventure, player characters complete an adventure together, they each complete an adventure separately, right? So let's say that we're running a 3-session campaign for Solnar Swift Arc. There might be 3 adventures, 1 per session, in that game, right? That are play adventures. But between each session, so there's 2, because between first and second, and then between second and third, each player character will have a say adventure. And I'll give an example of a say adventure. So I am the fighter of this particular player character group, and the game master says, Heather, the game master, comes over and says, "Hey, Jason, what did your player character do? What did your fighter player character do when you were actually out and about? After you defeated the pirates?" And so here's what Jason says. Jason says, "Oh, well, I went to a village, Betharin, and it was about 100 miles north of where we currently are. And I went up there because I had heard that there was a bladesmith who I could commission to make a new blade. So I went up there, but what I found was that the bladesmith had turned into an alcoholic, and they were no longer functioning as a bladesmith. So I just went to the local tavern, and I was going to head back the next day. And when I was at the local tavern, there was a lady there who bought a round of drinks for everybody. And I said, "Hey, boy, that lady's really nice, and I really enjoy this mead." And I asked somebody there, "Why is this lady so generous?" And they said, "Well, she owns the local mill, and she used to be very frugal with her money, but now she's not frugal, and the reason why is her son, an adventurer, came into town just like you, and inspired her son." Right? He told all these great stories about adventure, and her son went up into the hills and tried to kill some of the goblins that our woodcutters deal with every now and then. And he died probably 6 or 7 years ago, and she's been very sad ever since, but she hides it, and she's actually taking almost all the money from her mill, and she almost gives almost all of it away. Her house used to have, ornate tapestries and golden chalices, but now it's just iron, and none of the windows are covered. And she comes, and if anybody in the town needs something, she's giving away all her gold, because that's just how she's trying to deal with her sorrow. Right? Well, my fighter was so, Jason says, my fighter was so inspired by this, he went up into the mountains, and he killed 25 goblins, and then he searched the warrens of those goblins, and he brought back the body of that woman's son, and he stayed while that body was buried in the town. And that's what I did on my adventure. And when I was in there, I found 50 gold. And I also found a magic rope that will actually go right up a wall and tie itself to the top of the wall, and that's what I did, right? So everybody at the table gets to hear this adventure that Jason's fighter character had between the adventures, And guess what? He goes up a level. And he gets a magic item, and he gets gold. Now, the magic item that he gets, there's a limit on it. So if he's first level, he can't say, I found a +5 magical sword. What he can say is, I found a magical rope. Like, he can't get a weapon, or there's boundaries around it, right? So that's one of the things. So that's one of the things that is going to be really heavy in Solnar Swift Arc. You're going to be able to do a lot of cool things, but there's going to be boundaries around those things. And so, but then, then all the other players say these awesome ideas, these awesome story ideas, and they get a level, right? So this is how we're going to tell. So by the time this story is done, we've told three play stories where, the player characters have told together their adventure through play. But we've also heard how many say stories. We've heard actually 8 say stories, and these are each individual adventures, and in each one new locations have been introduced, and new items have been introduced, and new player characters have been introduced, and they're all generated by the players, right? Now, if you got a player there who's like, I don't know how to write an adventure and do all that, we'll have just random generated adventures that they'll say, I rolled and I went to this town, and so they can actually do everything I just said through random tables, right? But the play and say is going to be another big part, and in a 3-session campaign, you've had 3 play adventures, and you've had 8 say adventures. You have seen, and then that's 5 adventures for each of these player characters, right? And that tells the life story of these adventurers, right? And so that, and of course you could do a 7-session arc. Can't do higher than that, because Swift Arc keeps all campaigns to 3, 5, 7, right? But that's where I'm heading. And I just wanted to say thank you very much out there. I just recently got a comment from JM that was talking to me about, you need to remember online games and put that into your design mechanics. And so I really wanted to thank him for that that thought. I am thinking about what I'm going to do with online play. Kind of interesting. Not sure where I'm going to head with that. Still thinking through it. But I really want to thank everybody out there who's commenting on my videos and giving me ideas to make Solnar Swift Arc even better. It's really invaluable to me, and thank you very much. Take care.